All right, welcome to our participants and our panelists. This is the second webinar in a mini series of 3 on Iowa esports, both in general and some specifics about our association. This week, we are concentrating on the Iowa High School Esports Association, our state association for any of our high schools that are wanting to play in an organized group. There are some national groups that you can join and things, but this is statewide. There are several states around us and even reaching further that have their own associations. So we have now started this. Last year was our first official year. This is our second official year. We've got panelists here from the exec committee, as well as past members of the exec committee that can help talk about the history, what brought us to this point and things like that. So I think if we just go around and have a quick introduction of our panelists, introduce yourself, your roles, and then we'll kick into the actual meat and potatoes. I can start that off. I am John Grunwald. I'm the esports general manager for Fairfield High School, Fairfield Community Schools. I'm also the technology administrator, and I am the current vice president of the Iowa Esports Association.
All right, I can take it from there. So my name is Nate Rodemeyer. By day, I'm a social studies teacher in a 712 building here in Williamsburg. And then I am one of 2 esports coaches here at Williamsburg. And then I am also this year serving as president of the Iowa High School Esports Association. And last year, I served as the president-elect, which kind of transitions into this position, and done some other behind-the-scenes stuff along the way as well with that.
I can go next. I'm Allie Vandermine. I serve as the designated esports coordinator, which is our fancy term for just athletic director, essentially, of esports at Davenport Central High School. I'm also the founder and past president of the Iowa High School Esports Association.
Hi, my name is Phil Trimble. I am the IT director for Pocahontas Area Community School District, ITEC board member, and our school district is a member of the Iowa High School Esports Association.
I'm Patrick Donovan. I'm an ITEC board member. I'm also one of the esports coaches at Nevada High School.
My name is Josh Knutson. I'm the esports and VR solutions director for Bitespeed. I'm here with Tanner Duncan, the Iowa territory manager. We're going to be kind of in the background here, just kind of helping out. We've helped out a lot of schools around the state get up with technology. We're doing a webinar on that next week. But if you have questions or anything that you want covered, please feel free to throw it in the Q&A. I'll be monitoring that, making sure that we keep track of all the questions. And yeah, back to you, John. Thanks again for everybody for joining us on the Bitespeed Zoom today.
All right, with a busy day, Chris Kyle will probably be joining us in just a short bit. He is also an exec team member. He is currently our secretary. Last year, he was our treasurer, so he will be joining our panel later. All right, so first of all, we're going to start off with the history of the Iowa High School Esports Association. We were operating, there were several schools before my time that were starting to get into esports and things, but there was not a state organized group, and along came Allie. So Allie, if you want to take it from here, give us a little bit about the history, how and why you started the group. If you want to get into sort of the progression, the timeline that got us to here, and we can jump in with you too. But if you can start us off, please.
Sure, I'd love to. So when I had started the esports organization, or sent out the very first email for it, Central had had an esports program for a little over a year, about a year and a half. And we had played in some national leagues. And one of the things that I was really finding as we were participating in those national leagues is it really didn't mean a lot to our students. Kind of the biggest issue was like, I would say, okay, we're playing this team from insert New Jersey school here. And they were just like, where? What's that? What's going on? And it just wasn't a meaningful competition, right? It was just another team on the board. And so as we really tried to workshop some bigger concerns, for those of you who know my part of the state, it would be way more fun for us to play against Bettendorf High School than it is for us to play against some team in Scranton. right? It's just something that's way more interesting and engaging and fun for the kids and creates a lot of validity. And so I specifically remember I sent this email on the Monday of the week of our spring break because I wanted to make sure I had a whole week to answer emails. And I was so glad that I did, because I did spend that whole week answering emails. I just kind of sent out an email to every single athletic director in the state, asking if anybody would like to help or join kind of an esports committee to get something started in the state of Iowa. And so we spent from March through that summer, we met every single week. There was about 9 of us who started off. There's about 5 of us that are left. As we went through that process and kind of started things up. And then we had our beta season that fall, and it's kind of all fallen a little bit into place now. And so as we move forward with the esports organization, just kind of know that it was started by educators who really wanted to have a meaningful experience for their students. And I think that as the exec team, especially we're on our second real full exec team, as they kind of really go forward, that is the charge that we gave them as we kind of left and said, okay, your turn. It's by educators and for students. So if anybody else wants to jump in, that was a brief history.
Sure, I'll jump in as well, because I think we're kind of also getting at a little bit of the overview of what the Iowa High School Esports Association is meant to do. So yeah, building off of what Ali said, definitely founded by educators for students. And so I think one of the biggest reasons that things are founded was, like Ali was saying, instead of playing random schools from all over the country or not really having any sort of weight or stakes in anything, and also trying to provide an experience that maybe would match or align with traditional sports that are out there, so having a traditional season with a certain number of weeks of play and state playoffs and that sort of situation. We wanted to create a place like that for Iowa high schools to be able to do that, especially because, the value behind a program like this, it isn't necessarily, hey, we're playing video games at school. It's, we want to provide an opportunity for students who may not, be interested in football or may not be interested in some of these other offerings, but do play video games, to build the teamwork skills and build the communication skills and build all of those same things that they would get from any other sort of organized activity within a school setting. And so by doing it this way, we are able to guarantee that students are playing their neighbors, schools that they may have rivalries with, or at least, know who they are, and it means something to play that school. And again, it gives them that same model to follow of weeks of play and stuff like that they would see anywhere else. And then we also wanted it to be a place where that structure and kind of organization was there for the coaches and for the teachers and for everybody who's trying to make this happen, right? Instead of me just trying to reach out to Iowa City West or trying to reach out to Davenport and say, hey, we have a group of people that plays Rocket League. You want to play a game next Thursday? We wanted to have it be more, feel more legitimate and official than that, where it's no, you have a schedule, you're going to play, you want to do scrimmages on top of that, you go for it. That's fantastic. But making sure that piece was taken care of and I guess easier, that way they could focus on coaching and playing games and getting that playtime in with kids. And so having an organization like ours does a great job in helping to provide that piece as well. So instead of one coach trying to schedule all these games and randomly throwing them into a calendar and whatever, there's a lot of organization on the back end of it that we try to do our best to help manage with a lot of the things that we've done. So for example, the dashboards that Ali has made and has updated constantly and sent out to people to help get them their schedules and their rosters and that sort of stuff, for trying to have our presence on our website where people can access information. And we sat down and written manuals for all of our games and all of that fun stuff. So I guess that's what I would kind of add to that. Anybody else want to jump in?
I just want to, sorry, John, I'm just going to really quickly follow up. One of the other things that we really did with intentionality was esports is a new arena for a lot of people. And so when we were defining things or trying to figure out how we were going to structure things, we didn't feel as if we needed to reinvent the wheel kind of again and again. So when we're talking about seasons, if we say fall season, picture a football season, and that's what it is. I wanted to be able to have people talk to their administrators, their parents, and their families, and know what a season was going to look like, because they already knew what it looked like for athletics. So it's really important to kind of think, when we were playing in the big national leagues, fall season didn't really start until like mid-October-ish and ran through like January-ish. It was kind of a mess, and my schedules were crazy. And so as we were able to create this state organization, we really wanted to adhere as closely as we could with seasons, terminology, and everything else as closely as we could with the athletic organizations as well. Just that way we weren't reinventing anything that we didn't need to reinvent, because esports is so difficult to pick up as it is.
There are a couple things I want to add to this. I was there at the very beginning with Allie's first message that went out. I had gotten it right before my AD did, and he talked to me, and then we talked. And I was in at the very beginning of trying to form the group. I had to step down for a little bit because of some things, and then I got back in later. But it was one of those things, a couple thoughts. One is that I had no idea what I was doing. And coming in, part of the whole timeline as we went was writing the bylaws and things like that, as well as working on those manuals, which some of that had been done before I got on too. But being somebody totally new at this, like Nate was talking about, trying to find scrimmages and reach out to people and say, hey, do you have somebody who can play, and things got a little bit frustrating. And we tried some national stuff too, which was okay, but it was tough to get into a regular routine and things like that. Plus the whole idea of developing friendships / rivalries is kind of cool. I mean, before we formed our group, we went to Waco, which was just, 20-25 minutes down the road, and visited them first. And our first tournaments we played in were against them. And now this year we actually played face to face with them and Smash and things. And it's developing that rivalry. And anyone who watched last week or was on a little bit earlier here, there may be a little bit of a rivalry developing this week, right, Patrick? And it's just really cool, and it's fun to do. And it was great, especially during COVID, to be able to play a Michigan school or an Ohio school, but having that close locale was really cool. And something else that I really want to stress about the entire association is sometimes there may be a cheaper way. Sometimes there may be something that's a little bit easier, but I really feel what the association has at its heart is our students and what is best for our students. It might be cheaper to say, okay, everybody bring your own equipment, but the association recognizes that that's not the best for those that can't afford that. So it may, and you'll see later as we talk about some of our membership requirements in the application, some of the things that you have to provide helps to allow more students access that may not have had that. And I think that's also a very important point for the association. Anybody else have anything else they want to add to that?
I'll just share a very quick story about the rivalries or whatever here as well. And it's also related to Patrick. So last year when we were doing Overwatch practice, my students were playing online right after school all the time. And we would do some random matchmaking to get in there in games. And it happened like 5 or 6 different times, I swear. We'd hop into quick play or matchmaking or whatever, and we'd get paired against the Nevada Cubs. And so we could tell that we were going against them just by their usernames. And so my students, I don't think we played Nevada in the season. I could be wrong on that. I don't remember, Patrick, but they started trying to contact each other through like social media or whatever and sharing contacts that way. And then like my kids have already been talking to me and said, is Nevada playing Overwatch this year? Are we going to get to play against them? Because of that whole experience that happened there. And that only happened because we knew that they were also part of the organization and that they were also, at least relatively close by to us. And so that was just kind of a fun little, story that came up, as we were playing naturally.
I see we are getting a couple questions in the chat, and keep them coming. We're going to keep an eye over there. We will cover some of those later on in the webinar. So we've got some information we want to get through just about the association first, but we will cover those. The next thing, I think we've started to already talk about the purpose and the mission. I think we've kind of covered that, but going back to kind of our beginning, we were talking beforehand when we had our beta season. when Allie and the team started the first time to compete, there were 6 teams. And they played a couple titles and had beta seasons, and it went pretty well. They started the next year, which was my first official year, with, I do believe it was 12 teams at the beginning of the year. By the end of the school year last year, we were up to 40 teams in the association. And now today we just got the word we signed on our 51st team in the state. So that is incredible growth, and it's really cool. And we were even talking too, we're getting ready to start our winter season, which is going to be Overwatch and Rocket League. And today's the last day to sign up for the teams, but we are over 30 teams, correct, Allie? Over 30 of our 50 teams are signed up for the season. So this is going to be huge. It's going to be really cool. I'm going to try and share my screen here so you can see a little bit of our website and some of our locations, so you have an idea of how we are spread out. Give me 1 second here to find what I'm looking for. All right, I think you should be able to see, this is our website, IAHSEA.org. I put that in the chat. I think I got it in there correct. Here's where you can come for all of our information. This is our homepage. And if you scroll down to the bottom, we have our mission statement. Again, really centered on our students. It's not about necessarily who is number one, although it's really kind of cool to see, but it's about providing those opportunities for our students to play against each other, with each other, to learn the communication skills and the leadership skills that come with it. It's not just about playing games. As you come down, we're still trying to get updated because we are growing so fast. I think this map over on the right-hand side is showing about 40 of our 50 schools. And you can see that we're spread out fairly well across the state. When we started talking about our bylaws and things, we were trying to decide, do we set divisions? Do we set classes? And we thought, well, when we get a certain number, maybe we'll go to classes. Well, that might start happening sooner. We also have our Twitter feed and just a little information about esports itself. From here, you can get links to jump to our different seasons, as well as our board and our membership process and things like that we will talk about here shortly. In fact, I think this would probably be a good time to get into our membership process. You're kind of interested in esports, you're kind of interested in the state association. How do you join? Nate, do you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that you need to do if you're interested in joining the organization is there's a page on the website under Startup Guide that says Official Membership Process, and that's where I would go first. And it's got all these step-by-step things of what you need to do in order to join the Iowa High School Esports Association. And the very first step, and this is probably no surprise, is that you need to identify a person at your school who's going to be your designated esports coordinator. Like Ali said, like your esports version of your AD. And for some schools, this person is the one-stop shop for everything. So they're not only are they the deck, but they're also the coach, and they're also, all these other things. In bigger schools, maybe they really do get to have that behind the scenes role, but you need that person first. So designate who that will be. Maybe a lot of you that are listening to us right now, maybe that's going to be you. But that person serves as the official voice for the organization on behalf of their school. And so after you've identified who that person is, then the next step involves looking over some of the expectations of what it means to be a deck, and that's linked on the website. I won't have us click and go over all of that stuff right now. And then after that, it's talking about what are the expectations of a school. Within that, there's some conversations that you'll want to be aware of or that you'll want to have. There's some things on here like, how are you going to approach mature titles? Are you not allowed to play them at all? Do you have permission forms that you're going to have students fill out? There's lots of different paths to navigate there. What sort of codes of conduct or thing will you have for your student athletes beyond the expectations of a student that are outlined by the Iowa High School Esports Association? And so that's kind of where things really start. It's just kind of with that idea in mind and how are you going to build that? And then from there, it's kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of things. And so as John had mentioned before, one of the biggest goals of the organization is to make sure that things are equitable for students, that, you know, any student who wishes to do this can, and there's no barriers in terms of, well, I don't have a Switch, so I guess I can't join, or, you know, that kind of stuff. And so once you've determined who's going to do it and you want to get that process moving, then our next step is to definitely make sure that you contact a school administrator, right? Your principal, your AD, whoever it is, and start working with them from the ground floor of how are you going to provide this experience for students. And with that, this is where we'll start getting into the idea of building what we've called the Esports Agreement. So before we go any further, anybody else want to add on to anything I said, anything I forgot, or you want to add to?
I think that's really pretty good. The esports agreement it's a big deal in the application process. And by the way, I'd like to welcome Chris Kyle here from Osage. He is our this year's current secretary. Last year, he was our treasurer. He is now here to join the conversation. Right now, we were just talking about the membership process, Chris, so that you are aware of that. That esports agreement, I think we can take a second to talk about that here. That just really solidifies a partnership at the local level between your AD and your team or your club, and makes sure that there is supports in place to make sure that the club can thrive and be supported and not just kind of orphaned. And it's something, we don't have a specific form that you fill out. It's kind of left to the individual schools to put in those things that explain how you are going to work together to keep everything moving and supported. And then it is signed by the AD or an administrator and your deck to show that, yes, everybody's on the same page there. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add to that, or if we want to continue with the rest of the process, but that is a big piece of that.
Yeah, the only thing that I would jump on with that is that we did deliberately leave the esports agreement kind of vague, because we really wanted it to be a conversation. And the whole point of the agreement was really to capture that conversation about not only your own plans for accountability, but also, you know, your own plans for sustainability. We're getting a lot of really great questions in the chat, and so I'm going to address one of them right now, which is, what is the time commitment for a mentor? And that goes into that esports agreement, right? Like what you're actually going to be able to commit as a coach and what you're actually going to be able to do should be a part of that process. And that's really how you determine the capacity. And by that, I mean, what games you're actually going to participate in is what time commitment do you want to have as a mentor? So I just wanted to kind of answer that question a little bit there, just because it was kind of relevant.
For sure. John, are we ready to continue then, do you think, with the next
process?
part? Yeah.
Yep, I think so.
All right. So once you've gone through and thought about all of those pieces and started creating this document, then the next step is actually filling out an application for membership to the organization, and that's found on the website. That ends up being a Google form, and when you get into that form, it asks for all sorts of information. So what's the contact information for your deck? What's the contact information for the school's activities director? You know, you're going to have a spot where you upload your esports agreement. If your program has or will have a YouTube page or a Twitter page or somewhere else where they're streaming, or, you know, want that shared out or available, then you'll put that stuff in there as well. But you'll actually fill out that application and upload your completed esports agreement as part of that. After you submit that application, then it goes to the executive team for review. And so we check that you're in good standing with the Iowa High School Athletic Association and the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Unions, because even though we're not officially sanctioned by either body, we do try to be as legit as possible by making sure that schools that are working with us are also in the clearing in both of those organizations. And that you haven't had any previous membership terminations or other issues with with our organization within the last 365 days. So once you complete your application, which includes your completed esports agreement, then you'll get approved to join our Discord server, which is our official method of communication. And then when you get in there, there's rules for how to set up your name, getting roles assigned as a deck or a coach, and then looking for the games that that you're interested in. And so that's kind of the next big step. And honestly, that's like the big hurdle for schools, is you have to get all those things kind of aligned, right? You can't really go through this part of the process until you've talked with your principal, you've talked with your AD. You may, depending on your school, may have had to go to before your school board to get approval. It really depends on the local politics in your area and what's expected of you. But once you go through all of those things and then fill out your membership application, then we can talk about now you're officially a part of the group. How do you go into that probationary season? So before we talk about like your first official season, anybody want to hop in here?
I think it's important to mention that, yes, we looked at both the Boys and the Girls Athletic Association as we worked on our bylaws, and like you mentioned, sort of that legitimacy and keeping some of those same standards and things as we built our own. It does not mean that we currently are affiliated with them, but we use them as a model because they seem to be a model that works. And so that was something we looked to quite a bit, I would say, as we built that. Would you agree, Allie?
Yeah, just to kind of jump in there, we've actually deliberately decided to not be officially associated with either the boys union or the girls union. And a part of that is because we're co-ed. And it wouldn't really, there were a lot of conversations about whether or not we would go with one or the other. And lots of conversations between myself and the executive directors of both organizations. And we really all just kind of decided that it would be best for us to kind of operate as our own. So we are akin to like the band union, there's like a music association, there's cheerleading and dance. So we're really, a lot of our structure is taken off of actually the dance organization in Iowa, and how they kind of regulate their own coaches as well.
Okay. So next, your probationary status.
Absolutely. So that means, so what does probationary status mean? That means that you are able to participate in one varsity title per season. And so you should now choose your first title and then sign up to play that game. The reason that we ask or expect schools to do one varsity title is because we don't want any one person to become overwhelmed, especially if you are starting off by yourself. There's a lot of ambition, there's a lot of energy when you're first going, and you might be like, oh, well, let's do Overwatch and Rocket League and whatever. And that can very quickly become very overwhelming. And we want to protect those of you guys who are doing this, especially because a lot of you, especially at the start, are doing this as a volunteer. And maybe some of you will always do it as a volunteer. Maybe some of you will eventually get paid, whatever your school decides or whatever you can do. But we really want to protect your time as well and not have you bite off more than you can chew at the beginning and immediately become burned out. So for probationary status, you get to do one varsity title. And then if you want to do a JV team or even a couple JV teams, that's something that you can do as well. We just caution you to make sure that you don't take off more than you can handle on that very first step.
I'd like to add one thing there too, and it kind of goes hand in hand with that. We talked a little bit about some of the national leagues, and we're not necessarily knocking that at all. But one of the things that we hear over and over again, I've heard it in several different places, is sometimes you've got teams that don't show and you end up with bye weeks and your kids aren't able to play. And again, our association is a lot about getting the kids the time to play and having a great experience. So that's a part of this probationary session too, is you need to complete that first season without any of those problems, because it just shows, one, a commitment, two, it keeps you from getting burned out, and three, it keeps the kids playing. It's very important to keep them interested and give them something to work for, I would say.
Absolutely. As John was saying, today is the last day for us to sign up for winter season games. So for Rocket League and Overwatch. So if you're watching this and you're on the fence about joining, like obviously I think winters may be a little bit out of your realm now. But we are, we will be back in the spring as well with Mario Kart team races, as well as we're doing Smite for the first time, which is going to be awesome. And so if you're interested in hopping in with either of those titles, then that's something to look at here as well. But we have students sign up by a predetermined time to know how many teams we have. We use that to then create our season schedules and get those sent out to schools. That way they can put it on their school calendars, get it to their activities department to put on their calendars, allows them to contact the other coaches and reschedule games due to, parent-teacher conference conflicts or no school day conflicts or those kinds of things. And then get that information out to community members as well, right? So parents know when their students are playing and that sort of stuff. So again, you would have to successfully complete your probationary season playing one of those varsity titles. And then once you've done so, you would then graduate from probationary status to full member status. And then as a full member, that would give you, voting. Your deck would then have voting privileges, I suppose, within the organization, where if we're voting on matters in like our manual reviews at our annual meeting, you would be able to contribute to that. And then more importantly, for most people, it opens up the opportunity to compete in as many or as few varsity titles as you wish. So, you complete your winter probationary doing just varsity Overwatch. And then that means in spring, if you wanted to do varsity Smite and Mario Kart, you could do both.
That also helps too, when it comes to the exec team too, because once you become that full member status and some of that stuff, that fulfills some of the requirements to become a member of the exec team also, because it just shows that you've gotten that together, you can handle that. It's a plus. That's one of the things we look for when we get the members for the execs team. So we put those in place to make sure that you can be established before you come on board there.
Absolutely. After that, it says once you've chosen your first title for your probationary season, you want to assemble your equipment and your team. And so it says it's recommended that you assemble the team at least 2 months before the start of the season, or as best as you can, right? Because you want to have the time to get your equipment up and running, work out those technical issues, work with your IT staff if you need to make sure you're able to connect and have a good experience there. And the manuals can help with that a little bit. There's a lot of great people in the Discord that can help answer those types of questions, but that's kind of the next big thing. So that way, when you get to your first scheduled game, hopefully you can connect with the other school, things can go pretty seamlessly and everybody can have a good time rather than having constant disconnects and issues like that, which, admittedly, the first time you do it, maybe something that you run into because you thought you had everything set up and then you go to play and just something's just not clicking that you didn't anticipate. It certainly happens, but I will say, I think our members have done a really great job of showing grace to each other and working through those things and, rescheduling games if they need to make sure that the kids get to play. And then before the season begins, next you would want to find maybe find some teams that want to scrimmage with you or, get your practices started within your school using our official rules and that sort of stuff. Again, like I said before, about a month before the season starts. So here in a couple of days time for the winter season, schools will receive their schedule and then you go through that schedule, find any conflicts, get those sorted out and get all that information out there to your community and your students and that sort of thing. And to kind of help facilitate that, we do have like days of the week that are dedicated to specific titles. So for example, in the winter here, varsity Overwatch will be on Tuesdays, varsity Rocket League will be on Thursdays, and then JVs would be on the other day, right? So if you have a JV Overwatch team, then you would do that on Thursday. So, that's something to be mindful too, right? If you want to do multiple teams, but you're only one person, can you realistically manage both a junior varsity Overwatch game and a Rocket League varsity game at the same time? Maybe it's a personnel issue, maybe it's an equipment issue, maybe it's a network issue, but just those are some things to consider also in terms of actually carrying out your season.
Something else I'd like to throw out here really quick, and because I think I saw a question about that, which we can cover in more depth later, but even these schedules and the days that we play on, the exec team kind of considers when some of the updates come out.
Mm-hmm.
do believe the fall schedule we changed because of when the Rainbow Six updates come out. So there are some scheduled days for those typically, and we try and watch that so that it doesn't interfere with the season. So, but we can cover that again a little bit if we need to.
You bet. And the reason that we kind of said like Tuesday should be this game, Thursday should be this game, is that way it's consistent and people are holding or protecting that space and working with other schools to make sure that those matches are happening. In the past, things have been a little bit more free flow where it's like, oh, you have to have a match sometime during this week with the other school. But, you know, that worked well for some and not so well for others. So we've kind of gone towards this idea. But again, the schedule comes out, you know, about a month or so ahead of time. And so if you're like, you know, look, you know, we're going to be able to play most Tuesdays, but this one Tuesday just isn't going to work, then, you know, you can talk to other coaches. Or if you have some individual situation with you in your school where Tuesdays are never going to work, at least you have a month to do that ahead of time. We have asked this year and potentially moving forward that you work out those calendar disagreements before the season starts and then adhere to those calendars as best as you can once the season actually begins. That way we have all those games and not a lot of reschedules. And obviously there's sometimes where there's matters that are out of your control, you know, whether other acts of God, whatever it might be, but that's really helped in having things run smoothly for everybody and eliminate some frustrations and things like that.
Ellie, you've got something to say?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in with a little bit of a pro tip when you're comparing your schedules. One of the things that I have been doing for the winter season is the kids who are on our Overwatch varsity season, I'm like, okay, give me your basketball schedule, give me your band schedule. And like, I'm already assembling those to kind of figure things out, but don't forget your schedule either. I think I've probably had like 3 or 4 matches this fall that had to be rescheduled because of somebody's parent teacher conferences. So just make sure that you're paying attention to your own schedule as well.
All right, and I think step 10 basically comes down to playing successfully through the season like we talked about, without forfeits and without any issues. And once that's complete, you become that full member school.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to say real quick that I should have mentioned earlier, you know, we've talked about the esports agreement several times. Again, like Ellie and John had said, it's kind of a free flowing document. There's not like a hard, you're filling out a template situation. That being said, all of us that are currently sitting as members have our own version of an esports agreement, and a lot of us would be willing to share what we have with you. I'd be definitely willing to share like what we've done at Williamsburg and share that out with people. That way, if you're trying to get this off the ground and you're not sure where to start, you can look at some examples of what people have been describing or talking about within their esports agreement, so that you know kind of how to get a handle on things and to start. So if that's something that you're curious about, we can definitely give access to that sort of stuff as well.
Yep. I would say that kind of covers the high school association in a nutshell. Some things a little more in depth than others. Before we get to some of the questions on the side here, do any of you wish to add any more to fill in anything we may have missed? All right, I think we've got that pretty well. All right, looking over to our chat here, can you guys talk? I think this is our first one here. Can you guys talk more about the team aspect of esports? How is this achieved or displayed versus just playing video games? Anybody want to field that, please?
I can actually talk since we're going to face John's team tomorrow, and I'm actually watching my esports team practice out there right now. And the difference is by being part of the league, you're facing against other teams that you may see repeatedly. And our players have worked together to help each other get better. So like they're giving each other's tips, they're pushing each other to get better. Even as we're looking at our match tomorrow, they've watched the film of our opponent multiple times. They figured out who they're playing and the tendencies of our opponents. And so then they even practice as that character. So like they have a Wii Fit trainer. So our players are going to practice as a Wii Fit trainer to help each other out. I mean, it's the same thing when you think about football practice. You have the varsity team maybe going up against the backups, but the backups have to help the varsity team get better. And it's the same thing here. They're constantly working together, helping each other out. And then on this side of the wall, I have Overwatch already practicing, and you have leaders on that team. They're talking about communication. They're talking about what can we do. So they're working as a team. It's not a group of individuals. It is a team that's competing together.
Yep. And likewise, our team too, we're watching some of their tape, and we even have some of our alumni who have graduated who have watched that and brought tips back to our team too. And it's that sharing of information throughout the season. We had some of our younger players that had special sessions with some of our more experienced players as they tried to help them improve throughout the season and work on certain things. And there's that team aspect there. I will mention that last year we had a League of Legends team, and they were some 8th graders, and they would come up to practice. But even watching them learn that team aspect, the communication and the organization of that team and being able to talk to each other, I took one of those leaders and put them on our live stream equipment, and they could start to switch between camera views and talk to the production team. And they were able to transfer that beyond the game to other things. So I think some of that is where that comes from too. And I've got several kids who wouldn't necessarily associate with each other under normal circumstances, and now they're becoming friends across some of those other borders and boundaries.
I think the way we kind of accomplish some of the team aspect here is like John and Patrick both said, we do have video review. So typically we'll have like a day a week where we come down and we review the last week's game and talk about it, or preview streams from another team and talk about what we're going to be up against. We've done that. My practices with my specific teams, before we go down to the lab and hop on the console or on a computer right away, we always do like huddle time at the beginning where we meet in my room first and we talk about our goals for the day. We bring up any questions people may have. Maybe we'll do some sort of simple team building exercise that's not, inside a game. So we've had all sorts of little things that we've been doing to try to build that team aspect in there. I've also had like student leaders that I've easily identified. For a lot of you guys, you're probably in a position like me where these kids know a heck of a lot more about the games than you do. And so then rather trying to fake that expertise, lean in on those students who really know the games and kind of work with them to be like good leaders for their peers. I had a lot of students, my Siege team this year was half new, half veteran. And so we paired off where a veteran and a new player would go off and go through a map together, and they just go over it once and do all the basic call outs. And then that veteran player would say, all right, go find this room. All right, go find this room. All right, go find this room. And so we're running like drills like that with individual students where they were working on those sorts of things. So that's just kind of some of the team stuff that we've done.
All right. The next question is bandwidth an issue for anyone? And I chuckle a little bit like that, but anyone want to chime in on that?
The official answer is no. The real answer is yes.
Yes.
And that's where you got to bring on the tech director as part of one of your team doing this. I think we brought that up last week, and that's an important thing just because there's going to be networking things like with the switch. We have our official switch set so it has unfettered access out and back so that it has no issues connecting with other switches. And then we figure out what goes on with our gaming PCs. So you really do need to work with your tech department. I know you think Frank called them tech overlords, and yeah, we are that role sometimes, having been in that position, but it is that kind of thing where you just got to work with them to try to do the best you can while working within whatever the safety requirements you have to have as a district.
And one of those great resources you guys haven't talked too much about is the Discord channel too. So when you're having a tech issue, you can just hop on there, have a conversation, and you have 51 schools that will help answer that question for you.
Definitely. And I'll just reiterate, if you're playing a Switch game, please have those conversations with your tech directors. Nintendo's servers and setup are not the best. So you might even think you have things golden and you go to play and it's just dropping randomly. And some of that are frustrations we've had as a group where we're like, we've tried everything as a collective. I don't know what's going on. We might just have to reschedule, or we might just have to do this. But making sure that you have that unrestricted access as best as you can and working with those people is super important.
Yep. And I know before last week, we had several weeks where we didn't have any trouble, and all of a sudden we were getting ready to play last week, and things seemed a little bit weird. Well, as a district, we had changed some SSIDs and things, and we realized that our switch was hooked to the public one. So I went in and changed that to a different SSID, and there was absolutely no lag last week, and that little change made a big difference. So yeah, it's nice to involve the overlords because they may have made a change that you aren't aware of or can help you figure out a way around it. So that is good too.
Kind of just,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say quickly, along those same lines. And I'm from a really large district. So the difference here, how I think of it is if you're going to play a baseball game, there's going to be a groundskeeper who goes out and draws all of the lines on the field, make sure that the grass is all mowed. You know, that's the same kind of idea here, right? Like you need to be working with your groundskeeper to make sure that your field is ready for play. You need to be working with your tech department to make sure that your field is ready to play. You cannot do this without them. So you cannot. So I just really want to reiterate that because we have a very contentious relationship with ours, and it's harder. It's a lot harder. So just be as positive as you can with them.
Yep. All right,
I was
next.
gonna say, for time purposes, I know we have a lot of questions to get through. Maybe just 1 or 2 people per question, just so we can fire through these.
Yep.
All right. So last time we talked about game licensing. Could you explain a little bit more about game licensing?
Who wants to take this nightmare?
I can try. I haven't said much, so I'll try. So game licensing, you're talking about each. So for instance, for Overwatch, you would need at minimum 6 licenses for your school. So that way you have enough for each role on a team. Now, I would strongly suggest having more than 6, because we run into that a lot where, like, initially we bought 8 because I thought, oh, hey, 1 to stream, 1 extra in case something's going wrong. Well, now I just finalized my numbers and had 19 kids show up. I have 12 machines and about 6-7 laptops. I have 8 licenses. So I'm having to rely a lot on kids having their own, or I'm going to have to talk to my tech director, talk to my AD and say, hey, I need to go out and buy 5 or 6 more licenses here before we start tryouts next week. And then for like Smash, for your Nintendo Switch games, it's kind of nice. It's usually just one license per game. And to be honest, if you're looking for a fairly inexpensive way to start, that I think the Switch games are good, because you're buying 1 game, 1 system, then it's just a controller aspect. How much money you're talking about, it depends. I mean, how in detail you want to get. Like our initial gaming machines we used were like $600, $700 a piece. The ones we have now are $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a piece. And again, Allie can say, you know, you can start very basic and then work up. And that's what we did as well. We started with about a $700 setup, and now we're running $1,500, $1,600 setups because we've gotten some grants and stuff. But yeah, as far as licenses go, it's just you have to maintain at least 1 license per game, per person in the game. So for Siege, you have to have 5. For Smite, you'll have to have 5. Rocket League, you have to have 3. But Rocket League is free. Smite is free. A lot of that is the free games. It's nice, but the pay for play ones, you have to have at least 1 per role.
And that's one thing I was going to add really quick there too. The association is really cognizant and tries to make sure there's at least 1 free to play game, because we realize that not everybody can afford all of that. So next question, what is Steam or storefront? It was mentioned in the last Zoom. Anybody?
I can take this one. So a lot of our games on PC, there's a lot of different storefronts you can use. One of them is Steam. So it's a digital platform owned by Valve where you can buy your computer games that way. There's other alternatives like the Epic Game Store, Uplay, etc. Depending on the titles that you're trying to get into, you may have to go to one of those. Most of these titles are offered across a lot of them. But it's just the name of the digital platform where you're buying those game licenses from. And so Steam was the default one for a long time. Now it's got some competition, but I won't get into a ton here, but make sure when you go through those platforms that you're very careful about how you purchase those games. They have a lot of anti-theft, whatever measures on there. So if you go buying a bunch of games at once, it may flag your school's card or however you're paying for those, and you might run into some issues. A lot of us have encountered that. And so, I've got a document that I wrote for how to navigate that, and other schools have experiences too. So if you get to the point where you're like, we need to buy 5 Siege accounts, before you do that, maybe reach out on the Discord server and say like, hey, how did you go about doing this? The other thing I'll very briefly say about that is a lot of the times those storefronts will run sales. Like right now, Steam has their Halloween sale going on right now. And so those games that may normally be like 20, 25, however many dollars might be on sale for like $8. a license. And that can be a really good way to start in on the ground floor as well, where you can get something for way cheaper, get 3 or 4 licenses for the cost of what would normally be one.
All right, the next one we've got there, game updates. We touched on this briefly. How and when will I know that I need to update?
The game will tell you, but it's mostly Tuesdays.
Mhm.
Next question.
All right, I think what the heck is Bitespeed and why is Josh here?
I guess I can answer this. Bitespeed, we're a technology manufacturer and a big esports player in the K-12 space. We'll have a whole webinar dedicated to esports hardware and technology next week. So come back next week and we can kind of talk about that. We're just here hosting the webinar and trying to be a partner for the state. And we can go to the next question.
All right. Time commitment for mentors. I think we talked a little bit about that, but anybody else want to talk about that? Time commitment?
It can be as much or as little as you as a coach can handle, to be perfectly honest, initially. A lot of it depends on the interest level. Like I said, like here, I have an assistant that helps me in the fall because I coach football as well. But otherwise, I'm kind of a one-man show here. So I run both of our winter and spring seasons, where other schools, you've got a deck as well as 6-7 other coaches alongside, which I mean, well, you know what I mean. Like, I don't mean that, but you have people that are helping out. So and I mean, like, it just kind of depends on the setup and how much help you have, and what, in my case, what my wife is willing to let me do. So, I mean, that as positive as I can. So.
And I know here at Fairfield, I've got like 3 other coaches that help organize the individual games. And I say, this game is kind of your baby. I'll help you get competitions or organize with the association, but you take care of your practices and things. So again, it depends on how many people you might have helping you. For Fairfield, we're all volunteers. So I ask what I can, but hopefully that'll help with that question a little bit. Is there a limit to the number of students allotted?
Yes. Basically, if you look at the number of varsity spots, multiply that number by 2. So if you have, Overwatch, which can have 6, your varsity team can have 12 spots on it. And then you could have the same thing with a JV team, where if you're going to run a JV, you could have 6 and then double that to 12. So you can have your roster and then like a number of subs basically that matches that same roster number. And so for, again, Overwatch, if you did both varsity and JV, you could have a team that's 24 or 2 teams that total 24 students. And then beyond that, if you still had more, if you had like 30 Overwatch students, then you'd have to look at, club opportunities or like running just like another team for fun to do scrimmages or whatnot. But yeah, there is a requirement. It's basically double the number of active slots on a team's lineup.
And that roster freezes at playoffs. So an important point, just kind of there really quickly, is that you can rotate kids through that roster if you have them, but it does freeze at playoffs.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. So like Smash, you've got 10 roster spots. You might have 12 or 13 kids that play. You could rotate them throughout the season, but once you hit the playoffs, you got to have your final 10.
Yep.
So, more info on streaming to YouTube, shoutcasting, Twitch. Never done this before. I think in short, some of that's going to be covered next week, correct? But does anybody want to add anything quickly to that?
I think the biggest thing that I want to add, and I'm kind of aiming this answer at the person who asked this, get your team started and then join the Discord. And there's a lot of people on the Discord, like a lot of coaches who would be happy to help get you started. But really be thinking that as maybe like a step 2, 3, or 4. And my cat is yelling really loudly behind me. I'm sorry.
Typically, when do competitions take place and how long do they last? I will start this off by saying, we saw briefly on the website where it shows what days those competitions will take place. How long they take depends on how competitive the teams are and somewhat on the title. So like Smash, you could be done in about an hour, but if you have to go to that 3rd set, that could push it to an hour and a half or more. Rocket League could essentially be done in about a half hour to 45 minutes. Siege and Overwatch, I think, could run a lot longer than that. So some of that, that's a pretty wide range, but we talked about it last week. I think the association tried to gauge it so it would be about an hour's worth of competition, give or take, under normal circumstances. Anybody else want to add to that?
Sure. Just to add to that, we also do it over an 8-week season with playoffs at the end. So once, winter starts in the first week of December, you'll have a game every week rather than having a bye or something like that for those 8 weeks. And then there will be several weeks after that that go to playoffs if your team makes it to playoffs.
All right, quick question. With the Winter League around the corner, my district wanting to expand esports team, we have 6 more computers for a total of 12. Even though we have just a varsity team, should we go ahead and add a JV team for Rocket League as well, so we have the room to expand or rather than wait until the spring season?
I would just say make sure you have the kids, because if you don't have the kids, one, you're putting yourself in a bind when it comes to, oh shoot, I have 2 kids gone today. And if you don't have 2 subs, you're kind of in trouble there, as well as, if you have to drop a team on JV, you're not only costing your kids, but the opponents in school a game that week. And so we've kind of like, if you're going to carry a varsity and a JV, you need to make sure, like for Rocket League, I think we normally say the roster +2 at minimum. So Rocket League, varsity, and JV, you're probably going to want to have about 10 kids if you're going to carry 2 rosters. If you have less than that, you're probably just going to want to go with 1. And if you want to rotate kids, that's your call as a coach. So.
Because another part of that too, and it's in our rules and bylaws and more of the rules, is that one student cannot play varsity and JV in the same week. You can only be on one of the 2 rosters. So you couldn't play the same person in both competitions that week. So that may come into play also. Do schools typically do fall, winter, spring seasons, or 1 or 2?
I answered this in the chat, but I think it just kind of depends on the interest. Like our school, we do all 3 seasons, but I mean, we've worked to the point now we're an official sport and I'm paid for 2 of the 3 seasons. So, I mean, that makes a big difference where if you're volunteering and you're a 1-person show, you may want to prioritize 1 or 2 seasons or whatever you as a school decide to do. So I think it's just kind of based on your interest, your school's support in that way, and then as well as your availability. So.
All right, the next one, any SIPA concerns opening up Discord for students on the school network?
We do not open up Discord on the school network. Does anybody?
We have it open. And again, it's for our high schoolers only, but it would be, it's installed on our esports machines for use for that, but we also have Discord server open.
Yeah, we have it open as well. So, I mean, we haven't had any issues with it. We do a lot of very strict expectations and talking about Discord's a privilege, not a right. This is how you behave in the server, that kind of stuff. But ours is open on our school network.
In Fairfield, it's not open for our students, but we have toyed with the idea of being able to open it for those that are active in the esports club as one of those things that is sort of a perk for joining, but also a way to help them learn responsibility in a controlled situation instead of opening it to everybody. But right now we are not open to the students.
This is my scared face for that, just so you all know, like more power to you all for opening it up. But if you're somebody who doesn't want to, I'm with you.
Yep. All right, next, what is the general operational budget for a team? I think we kind of covered that with the cost of games, but anybody else want to add to that as far as equipment or anything?
I think it varies a whole lot depending on, what you want to start. Nintendo Switch is going to be the cheapest way to start. And then, you really got to see what equipment's available on that. And right now may not be a great time to try to find high-end graphic cards. You may have to buy all-in-ones or gaming laptops, which is what we have, and they work pretty well. But yeah, I think it's going to vary a whole lot. You may just, if you join the league, probably ask some people how much money they spend on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into next week. Right, Josh?
Yep. And as we probably need to finish up as we're approaching the hour mark for today.
Boy, we still have a whole bunch of questions.
Thank you.
I think we'll probably, are those recorded somewhere that we can handle?
Yeah,
offline?
John, I've got them all written down. Really, the last one was just the distinction between varsity and JV. Could we play scrimmages for the winter only instead of joining a JV or a varsity league? And then kind of a conversation about different download speeds. Are there handicaps? So we can definitely handle the download speed thing next week, but maybe touch on varsity versus JV, what that means.
Yeah. So varsity versus JV, varsity means that you're guaranteed those 8 weeks of play. A lot of times the JV rosters may have fewer games because there's typically fewer schools signed up. And then with the varsity titles, you're also guaranteed the opportunity of making it, or the depending on how your team performs, the possibility of going to playoffs. There's not currently a playoff structure in place for the JV teams. Anybody need to add anything to that, or did I cover it?
I will say that I know we planned on 3 webinars. We as a group have talked about being willing to expand this to more. So after next week's session, we can have conversations to see if we need to continue this on like a weekly or monthly or even quarterly basis. So make sure to keep us in mind as you guys think about that.
All right, apologize if there's a question that we missed at the time. Again, we'll try and get to those. We definitely filled that hour. We thank you for your participation, tuning in, and hopefully we'll hear from you through the membership chain. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.